Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with jazz saxophonist Jeff Pifher. He discussed his 2019 CD, Jeff Pifher and Socrates Trial, Alternate Futures, Past Realities. Along with that, he talked about going to the Eastman School of Music in Rochester, New York, where he studied jazz saxophone with Walt Weiskopf, and getting his master's degree in jazz performance from the elite Frost School of Music at the University of Miami, and the time he also spent at the University of Southern California. He talks about all of these trails and things in between, so get to know him and dig this interview, my friends.
So, Jeff, thank you for taking a minute out for Neon Jazz. I appreciate it.
Of course.
Talk to me about this latest release. It has such a grand sound to it. Alternate Futures, Past Realities, released on the 29th of March. Give me an idea of what the artistic vision for this project was.
The vision for the project, as well as Socrates Trial, the band, is sort of this fusion of cinematic elements that you would find harmonic-wise as well as melody-wise. So there's a lot less of the standard 2-5-1 that you find in more traditional jazz or straight-ahead swing jazz, and much more of a cinematic approach, which might be, harmonic-wise, it might be more triadic in some ways. But there's also a little bit less conventional forms that you would find in a more popular song or in cinema. And so what I wanted to do is really stress the melodic development and strong melodic sense, but also get this long, extended improvisational aspect that you would find in jazz. So I've heard it described to me as cinematic jazz, which I really like as a good descriptor word, because when people ask me, how would you describe your music, it's tough for me, because it's not your standard straight-ahead jazz, although it's categorized in the jazz category because of the instrumentation and the fact that we have long, extended improvisational solos. But there's no swing element to it. So what I thought would be a great idea is this fusion of the classical world in terms of instrumentation and the orchestra, along with the jazz group, but not just like this, saxophone with strings type of record, which is great too, but something that was truly a hybrid of the two schools. And a lot of that comes from my background at Eastman School of Music. I studied jazz performance, but it's so heavily classical influence in that environment that I was really exposed to just amazing things that really inspired me to pursue something that was a little bit different. And most of my background is in straight-ahead bebop, and this was really a new arena for me to get into. The alternate futures aspect in the past realities is this kind of toying with this idea of past, present, and future. And so you can kind of see that related in the artwork, where it's actually the cover of the face or the figure that's kind of in this futuristic suit is actually a future Socrates, as if he were to come back, but in a future world. And so you see he's holding a sand clock, which signifies a sense of time. And then you've got, the space sort of element, but then you've got the ancient Greek ruins, and then you have the Greek symbology on his suit. It's really a sense of what if all of these things are kind of happening at the same time, both past, present, and future, but there's several different outcomes that could happen. So it's kind of this play on dark and light, tension and resolution, which I kind of believe that not only music is really founded on, but also life. It's this building of tension through maybe dissonant harmonies in this case, with this big release. And there's lots and lots of moments with high energy releases in this. And I wanted to make that music kind of more accessible, something that somebody might give a chance, because not only does the artwork look a little bit different, but also the music is a little bit more approachable to somebody that might not have a lot of experience in the jazz or even classical world.
So talk to me about where you were born and raised and how you got into music.
I was born in Grand Junction, Colorado, but I moved when I was 2 to the Colorado Springs area, Colorado Springs, Colorado, and I actually grew up in this tiny truck stop town in Monument, Colorado, which is right outside Colorado Springs. It's literally, when I was there, dirt roads, the truck stop, one high school. But the really amazing thing about that was that one high school had 3 concert bands and 3 jazz bands that met every day in school hours. It was really a tremendous experience that is not seen too often anymore. And I was surrounded by incredible musicians all the time, even being in this tiny town. Half the school was in bands, and we lived and breathed that stuff. And I was exposed to so many great opportunities. I went to Interlochen Arts Academy or Arts Music Camp twice, where I learned a lot from really, really tremendous musicians, and actually saw what it was to really work hard. I thought that I knew what practicing was by putting in a couple hours every day, but man, when I saw these kids that were younger than I in some cases putting in 8 hours a day, it really inspired me. And then from then on, that became part of my practice routine to this day. And I grew up in as an only child, lots of support from my folks who don't necessarily have a musical background, but sometimes like to think they do, which is always pleasant to hear their thoughts, and super supportive. I went to several music schools. I originally went to University of North Texas, found it was a little big for me. Then I went to Eastman, and then I went to and got my undergraduate. Then I moved to New York and did about a year working at Manhattan School of Music as a stage production assistant. So I was again surrounded by just incredible musicians. And then I went to University of Miami for the Frost School of Music for my master's. And then I spent some time up in Canada for a while, and then I actually went to University of Southern California and got a certificate in arts leadership and entrepreneurship, which I thought would really help round out my schooling. So that brings me to what I'm doing today in LA as a freelance musician and trying to get this project off the ground. It's pretty new. We've actually got a CD release party or show on May 29th, and we're going to do it with the full orchestra. There's going to be 16 strings and trumpets and trombone and all the works at the Blue Whale. We're going to record it for a live album as well. So that's been a big focus coming up, and then I'm headed to the studio next week to record the next album, which will also be with strings.
So did you always know you wanted to be a musician, or did it just kind of happen this way?
Oh, I always knew. I was in first grade when I first started asking for a saxophone, and my folks thought, maybe it was a phase, and I was just too small to even be able to hold it. I couldn't get my hands around an alto even. And so they said, if you want to play by the time you're in third grade, which is still a year before they were putting kids in band in the public school, they said, we will rent you one. And so I kept begging, and I would hear jazz around the house because my dad would play it all the time. Just records, CDs. And so they finally got me a horn, and then I showed up at school with the saxophone for show and tell, and I played, I didn't know how to play anything, so I played Jaws, it's just that da-da, it's just a chromatic, half step, like, okay. And then the music teacher pulled me aside, talked to the administrators, and they got me into the 4th and 5th grade grade band while I was in third grade, and they pulled me out of regular class, put me in band with nobody else, and they also had the band director give me private instruction one-on-one during school. It was really a great environment. So I started out real early, and I knew since I can remember that that's what I'm supposed to do.
What was one of the first live shows you ever saw that really inspired you and really moved you to want to do what you do?
I remember my parents used to take me to the Aspen Music Festival every year, and back then they used to have jazz as part of their festival. Now it's pretty much all classical. I know they do a music festival on one of the holidays, like a short thing, but they used to do a whole summer thing. And so they would take me every year, and, I was a toddler, and so I was hearing that stuff all the time. And then they started taking me to some clubs, which I still don't know how they got me into. And I heard Nelson Rangel, and he's a Colorado native out of Denver, and his sound was just incredible. And I remember being in middle school going to these concerts at this little club in Colorado Springs called the Dublin Downs at the Dublin House, and they would take me as frequently as if he was playing, and I really started to hear what it was like to be in the presence, not just the recording, the presence and the real sound of what the instrument can do, and I was hooked. I was just constantly finding avenues to get better and hosting jam sessions at my house and getting recording equipment, going to gigs. My high school band director would let me sit in the big band at the local bars or, restaurants, I guess. And so I think it was really early on. I also heard a lot of the more contemporary players like David Sanborn. And then it wasn't until a little bit later that I really started getting into some of the more straight-ahead bebop guys. And I've seen a number of guys that really inspire me. I remember seeing Michael Brecker in Boulder I think it was at the Fox Theater, and he was playing with Jeff Watts on drums. And the whole room was just vibrating. And that was an early one. I was in high school, and I remember that I was just blown away by what those guys were doing. So there's so many to choose from. It's hard for me to put one above all the others. And there's been many, many recently as well.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. Hey, Jeff, thank you for taking some time out to talk about your new album, Your Life in Music. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Yeah, thank you for asking.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to yet another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in California, New York, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. Thanks to Jeff for his music and his time. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com. And for everything Neon Jazz, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.